Yet, probably those actions might be forbidden because they were bad for us. In other words, they weren't bad because they were forbidden by God. No. God forbade them because they were bad. In other words, they have an objective nature and reality, and that's why God says you can't or shouldn't do them. Their objective nature and reality is bad, says God. Therefore, I forbid you to do these things. I would just then raise the question, what do we need God for? If morality is objective, if it's extant, if virtues really are good for us and vices really are bad, why do we need a God to enforce it? But he didn't take that next step. Anyway, so he says, probably those actions might be forbidden because they were bad, or commanded because they were beneficial in their own nature. So leaving that subject, we have finished the voyage across the water. We had not been long returned to Philadelphia before the new types arrived from London. We settled with Keimer and left him. We found a house to let near the market and took it. Now, as you recall, he and Meredith are going to go into business. Meredith's father is going to provide the capital needed to start a printing house. Then there'll be partners in it. Meredith's father providing the money, and Ben providing know-how and skill and labor. We had scarce opened our letters and put our press in order before George House, an acquaintance of mine, brought a countryman to us whom he had met in the street inquiring for a printer. All our cash was now expended in a variety of particulars that we had been obliged to procure, and this countryman's 5 shillings, being our first fruits and coming so seasonably, gave me more the pleasure than any crown I have since earned. So that's like the first dime or the first dollar, you earned your lemonade stand or whatever. And all the thousands and millions of dollars after that's not quite as important as that first one was. So now we're to the end of the chapter here, and the last paragraph is a side issue, side point. There's a crazy old codger. He says there are croakers in every country, talking about the ruin, always boding the ruin of the nation. He says there's an elderly man named Samuel Mickle in Philadelphia who stopped him one day and said, "Are you the man who's lately opened a new printing house?" And Ben says, "Yeah, I did open a new printing house." And he says, "Oh, I'm sorry for you because it's an expensive undertaking and the expense will be lost." And Ben was like, what are you talking about? The expense will be lost. After all, Philadelphia is a sinking place. It's going to go down. It's going bad. And Ben says, what about all these appearances to the contrary? New buildings, rents going up. And he says, those are all fallacies. It's even worse. Those are signs also of the demise of Philadelphia. We're going to hell. So he rented and rented. This old man rented and rented for years, and waited for the crash and waited for things to become affordable again. And Ben says, "At last I had the pleasure of seeing him give 5 times as much for a house as he might have bought it for when he first began croaking." So he saw the prices go up and up and up, and he says everything's going to fail, and eventually he just had to buy a place in the new market. It didn't fail, it just went up and up and up, and it's gone up ever since. Anyways, going on to the next chapter, we're at chapter 5. We talk now about the Junto. So now we begin with the Junto Club. The Junto Club is him and some of his friends that got together and formed this club to talk about stuff. And here we go. We met on Friday evenings. The rules that I drew up required that every member in his turn should produce 1 or more queries on any point of morals, politics, or natural philosophy to be discussed by the company, and once in 3 months produce and read an essay of his own writing on any subject he pleased. Our debates were to be under the direction of a president, and to be conducted in the sincere spirit of inquiry after truth, without fondness for dispute or for desire of victory, and to prevent warmth, all expressions of positiveness in opinions, or direct contradictions were after some time made contraband, and prohibited under small pecuniary penalties. You could neither give positive expressions or opinions, nor direct contradictions to somebody. It was that civil. They had it so civil that no matter what, you couldn't even use certain words under penalty of paying money. Here, the club continued almost as long. The club continued for almost 40 years and was the best school of philosophy, morality, and politics that then existed in the whole province. We acquired better habits of conversation, everything being studied in our rules, which might prevent our disgusting each other. Hence the long continuance of the club, which I shall have frequent occasion to speak further of hereafter. So now we skip down a bit, and he starts talking about how his reputation in the town came about and what people thought of him. And there's this gentleman, Dr. Baird, who gave an opinion of Franklin. He said, quote, "For the industry of that Franklin is superior to anything I ever saw of the kind. I see him still at work when I go home from the club, and he is at work again before his neighbors are out of bed." And Ben says, "I mention this industry more particularly and the more freely, although it seems to be talking in my own praise, that those of my posterity who shall read it may know the use of that virtue when they see its effects in my favor throughout this relation." In other words, to be respected as an industrious person gets you ahead in a lot of ways. And it's not just an end in itself, it's also a tool, a general way of life, a characteristic, a hint about your personality to other people, etc. A gentleman named George Webb now comes to them and offers himself as a journeyman in their printing house. We could not then employ him, but I foolishly let him know as a secret that I soon intended to begin a newspaper and might then have work for him at that point. So the then only newspaper printed by Bradford was a paltry thing, wretchedly managed, and in no way entertaining. I requested Webb not to mention it to anybody, but he told Khmer, who immediately published proposals for one himself. I wrote several amusing pieces for Bradford's paper under the title of The Busybody. By this means the attention of the public was fixed on that paper, and Khmer's proposals, which we burlesqued and ridiculed, were disregarded. He began his paper, however. He was like, "Ben's going to start a paper?" So he started one first. He began his paper, however, and before carrying it on 3/4 of a year, with at most only 90 subscribers, he offered it to me for a trifle. And I, having been ready for some time to go on with it, took it on hand directly, and it proved in a few years extremely profitable to me. Good job, Ben. It goes to show that you can't cheat a thinker. You can't take the thinker's idea and make it fly in reality. You can't force the thinker to give you an idea and then go execute it in reality. Because the idea isn't a floating abstraction you just have to bring down. It is a floating abstraction you have to concretize in 1,000 ways. And all those ways require as much intuition and knowledge about the idea itself as the original thought did. So you can't say, yeah, I mean, it would be a good idea to open a new paper in this town. However, you can't just open the paper and there it is. You have to open the paper and actually give value to people. You have to have the money to start it, the skill to do it, and the wherewithal to see it through. And the point is, Khmer gets these good ideas from Ben, and it's happened several different times, just with Khmer himself. Gets all ideas from Ben, takes them into execution, and fails at them. Can't make them fly. And then Ben does the same thing and it works. So it's not about the idea, it's about the execution of the idea, which is another reason why socialism and slavery won't work. You can't just chain people up, take their ideas, and go out and use them. You have to have the creativity of the individual. There's simply no other way around it. That's why people starve to death in socialist countries. He began his paper, he sold it to me, and it was profitable to me after a couple of years. Very profitable after a couple of years. I perceive that I'm apt to speak in the singular. The whole management of the business had laid upon myself, and Meredith was no compositor. He was a poor pressman, and he was seldom sober. So when he speaks of what they did as the printing house, he says he printed this, he printed that, the paper was profitable.